Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a pretty massive one for you today, one that I think is going to challenge a lot of the assumptions we all kind of walk around with every single day.
Yeah, it's definitely going to push some buttons.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But before we get into the weeds, I need to ask you a quick favor. If you love these deep dives, if you love getting the shortcut to the most interesting ideas out there, hit that like button and subscribe right now.
Please do.
Yeah, it really helps us keep the lights on and keeps us finding these hidden gems for you. So, housekeeping done. Let's talk about today's source material. I am holding a digital copy of a book titled Cornish Revival, The Second Coming of the Celtic Language by Conrad Riker.
And I can practically hear the collective sigh of everyone listening. You know, you see a title about Celtic grammar and linguistic history in Cornwall, and you're probably reaching for the skip button.
Right, exactly.
You're thinking, great, 20 minutes on the dative case and obscure dialects.
I thought the exact same thing. I opened this expecting a dry academic text about saving a dead language. But here's the twist, and it is a massive one. This book, it is not about linguistics.
Not at all.
Well, not really. It's what you might call a Trojan horse.
That is the perfect description. Conrad Riker has written a manifesto, but he's disguised it as a history lesson. This is a book specifically targeting men who feel, alienated by modern society, specifically guys who might identify with men's rights activism or the Red Pill manosphere.
Right.
Riker is using the history of the Cornish language and the hard-bitten men who spoke it as this sweeping metaphor for understanding the history of our institutions before they were, in his view, captured by feminists and Marxists.
It's honestly a brilliant literary device, even if the content itself is highly controversial. We're just here to break down what he's saying. The premise is basically this. Just as the Cornish language was declared dead by the elites, but was secretly saved by stubborn, traditional working-class men.
The miners and fishermen.
Right, the miners. Traditional masculinity is facing extinction today in the exact same way. Riker argues that our institutions, corporate, educational, legal, have been captured by ideologies that are actively hostile to the way men naturally operate.
Yeah, he's arguing that men are basically being gaslit right now. They're told their natural instincts to protect, to build, to compete are toxic. And what makes this deep dive so interesting is that Riker isn't just like ranting on a blog somewhere.
No, not at all.
This ebook is ultra long, it is incredibly incisive, and it's packed with biological data, history, and evolutionary psychology. It's fascinating.
We're going to try to capture the essence of it today, but honestly, we can really only scratch the surface of the arguments he makes. If you want the full battle plan, and Riker really frames it as a battle plan for this specific audience, you need to get the ebook.
Highly recommend checking out the original text.
Yeah, it is available right now on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Playbooks. Cornish Revival, The Second Coming of the Celtic Language. So let's get into the first pillar of his argument. He calls it the biological blueprint.
Right, so this is where he tackles the whole social construct argument head on. You know, the idea that gender is just a performance, something we're taught by society.
Sure.
Riker says absolutely not. He argues that masculinity is a biological imperative written in bone, muscle, and hormones.
He starts with the basics, right? Just the physical differences.
He does, but he goes way beyond just saying men are stronger. He notes the average 40% greater upper body mass, sure, but then he digs into testosterone. He points out that men produce 15 to 20 times more testosterone than women.
Wow.
And he argues that T isn't just a hormone for muscle, it's a psychoactive chemical that fundamentally changes how you perceive risk and hierarchy.
And he uses a really specific story to show what happens when society tries to, ignore this biology.
Yeah.
The Stockholm Fire Brigade experiment. When I read this part, I actually laughed out loud because it sounded like a sitcom sketch, but it was real life.
It was very real. So picture this. It's the late 2000s in Sweden. The government wants to integrate the fire service to make it completely gender neutral. So they run a drill where recruits have to drag a 200-pound dummy through a smoke-filled room. This isn't just an exercise. This simulates dragging an actual unconscious victim out of a burning building.
Right. Life or death. And the female recruits couldn't do it.
Physically, they could not move the dummy at the speed required to save a life. Now, a rational system would say, okay, biology matters here. But Riker points out that the government spent 300,000 kroner analyzing the failure.
300,000.
Yeah. And their conclusion wasn't that the bodies were different. They concluded the test was biased.
That is the gaslighting Riker talks about. Instead of admitting that men might be biologically better suited for hauling 200-pound bodies out of fires, they blame the test itself.
Exactly. And Riker contrasts this modern denial with the Ashe tribe in Paraguay. This is a hunter-gatherer society. The data showed that men directed 98% of the large game hunting.
98%.
Right. And he argues it wasn't because they oppressed the women, it was because when men did the hunting, the group's survival rate jumped by 37%.
So the argument is that specialization isn't sexism. It's just survival.
Precisely. And he brings that right into the modern world, specifically Wall Street. He cites a study claiming traders with higher testosterone make 30% more profitable decisions.
Wait, really? Because I would have thought testosterone makes you reckless. You know, the whole raging bull stereotype.
That's the common misconception. But Riker argues that testosterone in evolutionary context calibrates you for high-stakes risk. It doesn't make you stupid, it makes you decisive.
I see.
The hunter who hesitates when the jaguar jumps is dead. The trader who hesitates during a market crash loses the fund. Riker's point is that the biology that served us in the jungle also serves us in the market, but we're trying to medicate or legislate it away.
And that tension between what men are built for and what society tells them to be leads to what I think is the most relatable concept in the entire book, the double-bind doctrine.
Yes, this is the core conflict for the modern man, according to the author. Riker defines the double bind as a total no-win scenario. Society explicitly tells men, open up, be vulnerable, share your feelings, don't be the stoic, silent type. That's the script.
Right.
But the subtext, the biological reality of how people actually react to that, is completely different.
He tells the story of Mike. And I think every guy listening has been Mike at some point in their life. Mike is a corporate guy. He's focused, he's driving results, but he gets pulled into HR because his tone is too aggressive or intimidating.
Right. He's speaking the language of results, but the company wants him to speak the language of emotional consensus.
So Mike tries to adapt. He tries to code switch. The next time he's in a salary negotiation or a performance review, he admits he's struggling. He shows that vulnerability he was explicitly told to show.
And what happens?
He gets crushed.
Exactly. His boss cuts his bonus potential because he lacks executive presence or confidence. Riker calls this the trap. You are punished for being strong because that's labeled toxic, but you are penalized for being vulnerable because that's seen as weak.
He backed this up with some pretty brutal data from Harvard Business School, doesn't he?
He does. The research cited in the text showed that when men admitted uncertainty in a professional setting, their performance ratings dropped by 32%.
Wow.
But when women admitted the exact same uncertainty, no penalty. 0. Oh, and he mentions a Fortune 500 CEO who mandated meditation rooms to make the culture softer.
Let me guess.
The stock dropped 40%.
That is wild. It basically proves his point that despite all the talk about equality, we still secretly judge men by the old standards of stoicism. And it's not just the corporate world. Riker brings up the dating market, which is where I think this really hits home for a lot of guys.
Oh, the OkCupid data?
Yeah.
This is famous in the manosphere for a reason. 87% of women on the platform stated in their profiles that they wanted a man who was vulnerable and in touch with his emotions.
But the data on who they actually messaged?
Completely opposite. Men who mentioned anxiety, struggle, or vulnerability in their bios saw a 65% drop in incoming messages.
65%.
Yeah. Riker uses this to validate the red pill perspective. Look at what they do, not what they say. It's cognitive dissonance. Society demands a soft man, but biology still craves the competent protector.
It totally reminds me of the media comparison he makes. We write endless think pieces about how we want sensitive heroes. And there was that movie where Chris Evans played a really vulnerable character and faced all this backlash.
Right, but then Captain America, the ultimate stoic Jaws steel protector, makes $1 billion at the box office.
Exactly. We pay to see the protector, not the patient. So if the corporate world and the dating world are these minefields of mixed signals, where does Riker say men should go? His answer is brotherhood.
Chapter 3, Brotherhood as Survival Mechanism. He argues that men just bond differently. They don't bond by sitting in a circle and validating each other's feelings. They bond through shared tasks and, crucially, through insults.
The mechanic's garage experiment. This is a great anecdote.
It really was.
He talks about how in a traditional trade environment, if you screw up, nobody says, oh, it's okay, you're learning. They say, did your toddler assemble this?
To an outsider, that sounds toxic. It sounds like workplace bullying. But Riker argues that insult culture is a way of stress testing your brothers. It's a simulation of high-stakes pressure.
Right.
If you can't handle a joke about your wrench skills, how are you going to handle it when the engine block cracks? He cites a study showing that apprentices taught with this rough feedback actually learned faster and made fewer dangerous mistakes than those taught with polite feedback.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And he scales that up to the military, citing Pentagon and Marine Corps studies.
Yeah, the data there is striking. All male units completing objectives 22 seconds faster in urban combat drills compared to mixed units, and having far fewer disciplinary issues.
Which leads to what he calls the committee problem. He compares the Spartans to the Minoans.
This is a fascinating historical deep dive. He paints the Minoans in Crete as this consensus-driven peace palace culture. They had committees for everything, and when disaster struck, invasion, systemic collapse, they vanished.
Gone.
But the Spartans, on the other hand, were hyper-hierarchical. They reared boys in military brotherhoods, not consensus committees. They survived because when the crisis came, they didn't take a vote, they acted.
And that leads perfectly into crisis masculinity. This is where the book gets pretty dark, but also incredibly compelling. He talks about the glass cellar. We always hear about the glass ceiling preventing women from reaching the top. But the glass cellar is where men are trapped at the bottom. He goes into the protection imperatives. The statistics are undeniable. Men make up 93 to 99% of workplace fatalities, combat deaths, dirty, dangerous jobs.
Riker argues that men are biologically treated as disposable to the species. We are designed to take the hit so the tribe survives.
And the story of the Chilean miners really brings this to life.
Yeah.
2010, 33 men trapped 700 meters underground.
This is the absolute centerpiece of the crisis chapter. Luis Urzua, the shift foreman. When that mine collapsed, they had enough food for maybe 48 hours. They were down there for 69 days.
Unbelievable.
And Riker points out that Urzua didn't run a democracy down there. He didn't ask everyone how they felt about the food situation.
He just took charge. Masculine hierarchy.
He became a dictator, essentially. He rationed one spoonful of tuna every 48 hours. And there was that terrifying moment where one of the miners started to panic, screaming, using up precious oxygen.
Yeah.
Urzua made the call to sedate him.
That is a brutal calculus.
It is. But Riker's argument is that if they had held a committee meeting or tried to be inclusive of the panicked guy's feelings, every single one of them would have died. Hierarchy saved them. He connects this to the miracle on the Hudson.
Oh, Captain Sully?
Right. Riker claims Sully's brain processed threats 9 times faster than a normal person because of his training and that biological wiring for crisis.
Wow. And he ties this into financial risk, too, under the risk calculus chapter.
He does. He notes that men with high testosterone take 27% more financial risks, and he points out that male-led Fortune 500 companies in the 2008 financial crisis actually performed better in the crash than their female-led peers.
Because of that risk calculus. But Riker says we don't value this anymore. We only value the peacetime skills, empathy, consensus, safety.
Exactly. He calls it the bow tie bias. It's a concept from decision theory. Imagine a guy gives you a stock tip that will make you a millionaire, but he's wearing a ridiculous spinning bow tie and has a squeaky voice.
You'd probably ignore him.
Right. Our emotional brain says, ignore this clown. But a rational system looks past the bow tie and checks the math. Riker argues that male-structured traditional hierarchy is designed to ignore the bow tie and focus on the result. But modern systems focus entirely on the bow tie, the tone, the appearance, the feelings, and ignore the actual results.
Which brings us to the capture of institutions. This is the part of the book that explains why the double bind exists in the first place. He argues the very systems men built have been turned against them. Gynocentric systems, he calls them.
He starts with family courts in the fatherhood chapter. He cites stats showing mothers get custody 83 to 86% of the time.
And he tells that heartbreaking story of the paramedic father.
Yeah. This guy delivers babies in the back of ambulances. He saves lives in car wrecks. He goes to court for custody, and the judge tells him that changing diapers wasn't real parenting. And since the mom did more of that, she gets the kids. The court completely failed to see the value of the protection he provided.
And Riker draws a direct line between that and the correlation of fatherless homes to incarceration and dropout rates.
He does. He sees it as a systemic failure.
It's the war on boys in education, too. Riker claims schools pathologize normal male energy. If a boy wants to run around and wrestle, he's diagnosed with ADHD.
And then there is the media deception. Remember the Gillette ad?
Oh man, the best a man can get reboot. where they basically lectured their own customers about toxic masculinity.
Riker breaks that down as a prime example of institutional capture. A company selling razors to men decided that the best marketing strategy was to attack men. Sales dropped, obviously.
Obviously.
But his analysis of action movies is great here. He says heroes who cry, die. Heroes who shoot, live. That is the biological lesson men absorb. But the media keeps trying to sell us the exact opposite.
So we have biology, we have the double bind, we have institutions that are fully captured. It paints a really bleak picture for the guys reading this. But this is where the title finally comes back into play. Cornish Revival.
This is the white pill at the end of the red pill book. Riker explains that the Cornish language was officially declared dead by the culture. The elites in London, the academics, they signed the death certificates. They said it was just a memory.
But it wasn't.
No. It was kept alive by fishermen and miners, working class men. They spoke it in the dark, underground, out on the boats. They taught it to their sons in secret. They completely defied the official death certificate.
So Riker's metaphor is that traditional masculinity is the new Cornish language. The HR departments, the universities, the media, they've all signed the death certificate. They say it's dead or that it's toxic.
And Riker is telling men to be the miners. He's saying, go underground. Keep the language of masculinity alive in your brotherhoods, in your gyms, in your businesses. Don't expect the mainstream institutions to validate you. They won't. You have to save it yourself.
That is powerful. And that leads to his final section on legacy engineering and immortality. He wants men to build systems that are anti-fragile.
He talks about legacy as anti-fragile systems. He uses Genghis Khan's genetic legacy as a historical example, and the Rothschilds' financial protocols that kept their wealth intact across generations, or Andrew Carnegie building legal contracts for his libraries so communities were forced to maintain them.
So what is the actionable advice here? What does Riker demand the reader do right now?
He has a few very clear demands. First, build financial fortresses.
Right.
Second, completely reject the vulnerability trap. Third, maintain your physical strength, because as the fire brigade showed, biology is the ultimate reality. And finally, create systems that outlast you, build your own Cornish revivalists.
In the outro, the epilogue of the book, he basically calls for men to reject the double bind and accept their biological design.
He says to stop apologizing for being lions.
Wow. Stop apologizing for being lions. Look, this is a lot to digest. And like I said at the top, we've only given you the overview. Riker supports all of this with hundreds of pages of analysis. It is an ultra-long, truly fascinating read. And if you are part of that audience, if you feel alienated by these modern systems, this book is written for you to understand the history of these institutions.
It really is the battle plan.
So here's what you need to do. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now. Search for Cornish Revival, The Second Coming of the Celtic Language by Conrad Riker. Don't let the title fool you. It's the book you need. Buy it. Read it.
And the conversation doesn't stop with the book. Riker is constantly publishing new articles and updates. You absolutely need to follow him on Substack at Conrad and Riker. That is at Conrad and Riker.
Definitely check that out. And hey, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Building on what Riker said about the veneer of civilization versus the biology underneath. Next time you're sitting in a meeting or listening to a politician, ask yourself, are they talking to the veneer or do they understand the reality? And more importantly, which one are you building your own life on?
That is the real question.
If this deep dive gave you an aha moment, if it articulated something you felt but couldn't quite put into words, share this with a friend. Send it to a guy who needs to hear it. And please hit that like and subscribe button before you go to support the show. We have more deep dives coming that are going to be just as eye-opening. Thanks for listening.
Catch you next time.